Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm one of your hosts for today's live webinar called Who Did I Eat for Breakfast? We have a lot of great information that we're going to be covering today in this session, and hopefully you're going to be able to take away some of this information and use it for your own needs. So now I'm going to hand it over to Jen, who will be presenting today.
Thank you so much, Jordan. I appreciate it. Let me go ahead and turn on my camera real quick just so I can wave to you and you can put a face with the name. Hi. I managed to put on a shirt today, so that way you know that I'm not actually in my pajamas or whatever. I will keep my camera off because I have 3 cats that keep visiting me, so I hate that. I'm sure all of you are facing the same thing if you're working remotely, but I will go ahead and turn off my camera, but it's really nice to have everybody here and appreciate your time in coming. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see the screen. If you have any problems, just go ahead and let Jordan know in the Q&A box that he talked about a moment ago. As he said, there's no chat for this webinar, unfortunately, but you can get us messages through the Q&A via Jordan. So I'm excited today to present about our new Owl Pellet Kit that we've co-produced with Nasco, and to tell you just a little bit of background about me and where I work and what our sort of outreach is like. Let me kick it off by telling you I work at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. I'm the manager of K-12 programs, and we are located in Ithaca, New York. This is a picture of our building. We've got about 200 to 250 staff, and all of us are dedicated to interpreting and conserving the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science focused on birds. And I am lucky at the lab to be in a role that does K-12 outreach based on the amazing research and citizen science projects and other resources that the lab has to offer. We really travel across 3 main spheres. We aim to connect kids to nature, to help them do citizen science projects, and to inspire them to do inquiry science investigations. Citizen science is the idea that regular people can contribute data that scientists can use. You may have heard of iNaturalist or Journey North, Project Globe. Our biggest project is called eBird. But today we're really going to talk about resources that are more in the nature connection area and just connecting kids to their local flora and fauna. In this webinar, I'd like to make you familiar with the Dissecting the Food Web and Owl Pellet Investigation Kit. We co-offer that with and via the Nasco catalog. We're going to talk just a little bit about concepts around food chains and food webs and trophic levels. I'd love to let you gain some insights about owls, because I think that owls are one of the missing ingredients, if you will, in most owl pellet kits. You learn about the pellets and sort of what the owls ate, but less so about the owls who actually produced those pellets. And I believe one of the fun things about our kit is it really can connect you to the owls themselves. And then finally, I just want to give you a very quick overview of some other Cornell Lab resources, maybe things that you can use in your classrooms that are in some ways unrelated to owls. And I think we'll wrap up probably about a half an hour from now, maybe a little bit longer, depending on questions and so forth. So let me kick right off by talking a little bit about this kit. A couple of years ago, we were thinking about ways to meet our mission mandate of engaging kids through birds, and realize that there are so many schools and classrooms around the country that are dissecting owl pellets. If you're thinking of the one thing that almost every student at some point in their K-12 career does, it's dissect owl pellets. And we hadn't really thought of doing an owl pellet kit, but we said, why not? You know, we've got so many resources to draw on and sounds and videos. So we conceived an owl pellet kit that would go fairly deep into the concepts of food web and also thinking about the natural history of the owls that that make pellets. In the case of the common pellets that you have perhaps dissected in the past, they're produced by this animal that you see right here. It's called a barn owl. And the barn owl, interestingly, is one of the most widespread birds in all the world. It's found on every continent. It's actually pretty common. And most if not all of the owl pellets that are dissected in classrooms are wild harvested. So that means that it's a wild owl that ate some prey and produced those pellets that our students are using. And so when I think of all the kids that are dissecting owl pellets, it shows just how many of these owls are out there and how much prey is out there in the wild as well. And of course, as we're thinking about producing a standards-based kit that teachers can use and meets a lot of their standards, we tied the kit to both the Common Core state standards and the Next Generation Science standards, which of course most states are either accepted or some states have closely aligned standards with that. And the Owl Pellet Kit is available on the Nasco website, as you might imagine. And we also sell just the printed materials, and we also sell separately replenishment kit that contains the consumables. One thing that I like about this kit, we worked with teachers in order to conceive it and try to correct some of the common problems that we saw in other kits. The quality of the art, including and especially the bone charts and those kinds of things, is incredibly high. And the other thing that I like about it is we included these recycled material clamshells, the plastic containers, because we understand that so many teachers can't get through the whole pellet dissection in one class session. So by putting in these plastic containers, a child can put all the materials into their plastic container at the end of your class period and save them for the next day. And they're see-through so that they can kind of see into them even when they're doing that. And it keeps it all together and neat. Can even be sent home with them if they're interested in that kind of thing. So I'd like to show maybe even just part of a video that we produced. When we were field testing these resources, we invited a group of about 15 or 16 kids of mixed ages to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology just to see how they used the materials and what they thought of the kit. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. Unfortunately, sound when we did the test wasn't working, so I don't think you're going to be able to hear the fun music that's behind the video, but I would like to just kind of talk you through it just a little bit. So this doesn't look like owl pellet dissection. What these kids are doing is doing a food web tangle, which we'll talk about in a bit. You can see some of the supplies that the kids are using. They're opened up the owl pellet. This was a group of kids, I believe we advertised 1st through 5th grade. And so it's a mixed age group of kids. I don't believe any of them had ever dissected an owl pellet before. And they were so excited. The little girl just said, "Oh my gosh, Timmy just found a jaw." We were really pleasantly surprised by how into the dissection the kids got. And perhaps if you've done owl pellet dissections, you've seen in your experience how into it they are. You can see some of the materials in the kits. We outlined really carefully all the bones that are in the kits, and then the kids were spending a lot of time matching the bones up and trying to figure out whether it's a leg bone or an arm bone or what kind of bone. And then you can see just some of the supplies that are in the kit. So it's, I guess, my bias, because I come from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and birds are front and center. And I think, you know, maybe when, oh, I've misspelled great. That's a great horned owl, not a gret horned owl. When you think about potentially dissecting pellets, maybe you've taught food webs through it, or maybe you've just dissected the pellets and had the kids find the prey items. Maybe you've talked about predator-prey organisms. But we really thought about the owl front and center as part of this kit. And I think owls are cool. I mean, especially everyone's familiar with Hedwig from Harry Potter fame. And, hearing owls at night, they're kind of mysterious. Owls are a great gateway in my mind to think about adaptations. They've got massive eyes. Some of them don't have like an iris and a pupil style eye, but just a really black eye like the barn owl does, for really taking in as much light as possible. Great horned owls, like the one pictured here, are really camouflaged. You could very easily have passed a dozen owls in hikes that you may have taken in the last year or two in the woods, but you won't see owls. They're super well camouflaged. They tend to roost pretty high up in trees. Another cool thing about owls, if you notice around their eye, they've got that facial disc, that line of black around the kind of below the ear tufts. Some people think that those tufts on the top of the ear have something to do with, or on the top of the head rather, are something to do with hearing or ears, but those are really just for behavior, like for signaling basically. The ears are deep within that fluff that's in that black head, the circle on the side of the head. And the facial discs is what they're called, directs the sound into the owl's ear. So because owls are nocturnal, they're hunting at night, they need big, big eyes to gather in as much light as possible. They need excellent hearing, which they have. And the other cool thing about most, if not all, species of owl is they have near silent flight. Their feathers are more feathery than other birds. They're not stiff. Even their flight feathers and their tail feathers don't tend to be as stiff and severe on the edge as other birds. So they've got a lot of sort of softness along the lines of their feathers, such that when they're flying, it's quite silent. They can sneak up on prey. They've got adaptations for eating prey, such as their big talons and their hooked beak, which helps them dig into prey. They're also really strong, so they can, for their body weight, carry a pretty large prey item. In fact, great horned owls can get small cats and skunks, even though it's not a very large animal. It's really surprising how strong they are. So let's jump straight away into the lessons with that context. The first lesson is about the food web, and we really wanted the kids to understand not only what food webs are, but also how they're made up of food chains, and to provide examples of trophic levels and energy flow as well. So this is something probably many of you are familiar with, the food chain. Food chains always start with a sun, have a producer, can have multiple levels of consumers. That's a flexible thing. We could add an owl in here that eats the robin, for example, or a Cooper's hawk that eats the robin. And then when those organisms perish, they are eaten by or consumed by decomposers. I should say broken down by decomposers. So when we think about a food chain, starts with the sun and ends in decomposers. When we think about a food web, which is what you saw in that video the students were building, much more complex. And so each of these kids has a card hanging around their neck. They become parts of the food web. So we have a child that's the grasshopper and the earthworm and the swallowtail butterfly and the barn owl, etc. And then basically they just pass the string according to who might eat what. And there are lots of different ways to do this. There's really not a right or wrong answer necessarily, in what might eat whom. Like maybe kids don't think about jumping mice eating far beyond berries and seeds. They also eat a lot of insects as well. They need protein in their diet. So you can see on the left an example of one of the posters that's included in the kit. We try as much as possible to be open-ended in these experiences and to provide open-ended questions for you to ask the students, such to really pique their curiosity and their learning. Not just yes or no questions or right or wrong questions, but have them be critical thinkers. And we do that also into a jumping off point into trophic levels when we think about what those kids, where their position was within the food web. So the sun feeds the trophic, the trophic levels, giving energy to the producers, which produce things like leaves and fruit and seeds and flowers and nectar that in turn feed the primary consumers, which we might think of as herbivores, plant-eating animals. And then secondary consumers are such as humans, are omnivores or carnivores that eat herbivores. So these are lower on the food chain organisms. And then the tertiary consumers are the carnivores that eat the secondary consumers. In some trophic levels, you might see additional levels, but basically you've got producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers are the carnivores at the top of the trophic level. And trophic levels are typically presented in this triangle shape because it takes a lot of producers to basically support those upper levels of the tertiary consumers, because energy is basically dissipated at each step of the way. Energy is lost to heat and to digestion and energy and that sort of thing. And of course, all of this is outlined really well in the kit, and we put student readings on each of these topics in there. So there's many, many student readings that can be assigned as homework or in class readings. And I should mention, we consider this to be a 3rd through 8th grade kit. So the whole first lesson is really about food webs and food chains and owls' positions in those food webs and chains, and is setting the kids up to think about what owls eat. So we don't launch with the owl pellets, we launch with the biology of the owl and the food web. And then the kids find out, what are owl pellets, why are they important, and what kind of data can we get in figuring out what prey is in the owl pellets themselves. Image of some girls like digging into the pellet for the first time. Thinking about what is an owl pellet, a lot of kids have asked us in our workshops, are owl pellets puke or poop? They are sort of puke, I guess. When an owl swallows a prey item like a mouse, it goes into one of its 2 stomachs, and what can't be digested, the really hard parts, bones, fur, claws, teeth of the prey animal, is regurgitated less than 24 hours later by the owl. So it's not the owl getting sick, obviously, but it is the indigestible parts that the owl can't digest is passed up, and then the rest of the prey, the digestible parts, continue through the stomach. And again, there are readings. Here's an example reading about owl pellet facts, explaining the whole internal anatomy of the owl and what an owl pellet is and why dissect owl pellets. Give you a glimpse of what some of the other handouts are. When we're working with teachers to create this kit, they wanted a lot of images of the various animals. They wanted things like articulated skeletons and disarticulated skeletons to really show the kids what the bones were. And so we did lots of different views. We hired an artist to redo all of the things. We're lucky at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology because the Cornell University Museum of Vertebrates is housed at the Cornell Lab. So we could find all of these prey, potential prey within our collections and actually sketch them from scratch. So they're really super accurate. And of course, the classic activity of trying to figure out what is in your pellet is done through a dichotomous key. We did really good pictures of the teeth and other things, because that can be confusing when we looked at other kits and labeling the different parts, such that kids could use the new terminology that they're learning and really make the right conclusions with with the dichotomous key. And I apologize for my cats meowing in the background. So here you can see from above, this was suggested by a teacher that we do a skeleton such that the kids could really lay the bones physically on the skeleton and actually glue the bones on the skeleton and see how much and how many prey animals were actually in the pellet. And finally, the third lesson, predicting prey, goes straight back to the owls themselves. So on the left-hand side, we've got a barn owl. The middle is a great horned owl, stylized, and on the right is a little screech owl. And these owls are all found throughout almost the entirety of the US and into Canada and even beyond. They're different sizes, they're different shapes. You can see if you just look at those three creatures, even though it's a cartoon version of these animals, some of the differences. The great horned owl in the center is a much bulkier bird. It's a bit taller than the other two animals. It's got super thick talons. Two other similarities I see between the great horned owl and the screech owl are the style of eyes. As I mentioned earlier, barn owls are truly nighttime animals, and so they tend to have super dark eyes, unlike the screech owl and great horned owl, which are crepuscular. That means they hunt more with sunlight, especially sunset, sunrise, on well-lit nights. And so the kids are given handouts basically about these three owls, along with data about their size, their habitat, some of their natural history information. And then they're asked to predict how these three owls might differ in the prey that they eat, because in fact they do differ. Barn owls eat almost exclusively field mice. That's where they live in their habitat, also known as voles. Eastern screech owls will also do that. For a tiny owl, if you look at that eastern screech owl, it's got huge claws. And so they'll also eat things like mice, but they'll also eat things like crickets and other smaller prey. Whereas great horned owls hardly ever eat something like a mouse. They have massive talons, super sharp, crushing talons that eat bigger things, as I mentioned earlier. They are one of the few things that are happy to prey on skunks and house cats and that sort of thing. I wanted to give you some insight about some resources that are at the Lab of Ornithology. One is the All About Birds website, and I should mention links to the kits and links to the resources that I'm going to be sharing now are within a handout that Jordan will share at the end of this session, and I think email to you as well. When I went on All About Birds, it's a free website. Whenever I go to conferences and talk to teachers, it's quite common that people say, oh my gosh, I'm on your site all the time. And they're talking usually about the All About Birds website. It's just a treasure of materials related to birds. And as you can see, when I searched All About Birds for owls, I got images and sounds of all the birds, all the owls in North America. So this is free to use. The other resource I wanted to point out, which is another Cornell Lab resource, is called the Macaulay Library. It's a library, not of books, but of wildlife media. So this is a long-standing, almost 100 years old archive of animal media. We specialize in birds, but we have a growing number of other creatures as well in the database. I did a quick search in the Macaulay Library for barn owl and found a large number of potential specimens that you could look at. I've circled here, we've got over 11,000 photos of barn owls right now, almost 900 sounds that have been recorded by people. Many of these are citizen scientists who are taking pictures and making recordings in the field and sending them in, and then 107 videos that have been submitted. And I searched this by best quality, and of course the top images that came up as ranked by the crowd is really quite shockingly good quality. So I think my point here is, if you need photos, sounds, and videos of creatures, especially owls, the Macaulay Library is an amazing place to look. Just search the species, and again, I always like to search by best quality so that the best options come to the top. And I should show you as well, I wanted to look for adult owls that were foraging or eating, just to see, since we're doing owl pellets. And one of the top images that came up was actually this owl midway through casting a pellet. So you can also search by different kinds of behaviors and sounds and so forth when you look at Macaulay Library. So hopefully that'll be a helpful resource to you. All this put together because, again, we want to provide kids with as many resources as we can. You can see here we've got great horned owl fact sheet, the eastern screech owl fact sheet. We also have the barn owl fact sheet sitting there, where these animals live, what they eat, how they nest, what kind of prey, and habitat and range and all of that. And then invite the kids to do a Venn diagram. What are the similarities and what are the differences between these three species? So involving some really good literacy components and critical thinking components. So as you can see, or probably can guess from the context of all of this, we really wanted to push beyond just having the kids simply pick apart a pellet and not have the concept of where that pellet came from, who made it, and what the habitat was like that pellet was created in. So to dig far deeper than just a simple pellet dissection. Okay, that is sort of the conclusion of the introduction to the Owl Pellet Kit that we offer through Nasco. But I do want to highlight just a few other resources that maybe you'll find useful. One is Feathered Friends. This is more upper elementary resource. It's a free download, seasonal content related to birds, free and very easy to use on a variety of content areas. The first lesson, which was September lesson, what makes a bird a bird. And again, this is all free download because we've got a sponsor from Pennington, the Bird Seed and Feed Company. And one of the things that makes this, I think, great for the time we find ourselves in right now with COVID pushing us into remote and distance learning or blended learning scenarios in many places, is a lot of home connections as well. Another resource to showcase is the Merlin Bird ID Wizard. This is an app. It's available on Android and iOS. It's amazing as a bird ID tool, but you can also browse birds, and the content in this free app was pulled from All About Birds, scientifically accurate. It's pulling in some of the best pictures from Macaulay and constantly being updated. So if you have some space on your phone and you'd like to get a little bit more into birds, I would highly recommend doing a quick search for the Merlin Bird ID app, and you will be glad you did. I have a 9-year-old who's been successfully using this since she was in kindergarten. It helps you figure out what birds are in your neighborhood, but again, also serve as basically a field guide in your hand. Another resource to show you, as you can probably tell from the context of what we've been talking about, we believe a lot in getting kids outside and pushing them to think critically about science and content. And so as we do these kinds of in-depth explorations and outdoor explorations, questions seem to naturally come up. So we've developed a free resource called Investigating Evidence. And that will help you turn your students' questions into real science experiments and observational studies. So encourage you, if you've got curious kids and you want to take that curiosity further into real science experiments and so forth, to check out that resource. And thank you, Jordan, for sharing all of those links. Another resource you might be interested in, Bird Sleuth Explorer's Guidebook, simple guidebook, free download, written at about a 4th grade level to get kids outside. And again, I think this is another resource that's good for the times we're finding ourselves in now, because it's something that you can send home with the kids that they can do relatively independently. And finally, I would be remiss to not mention our Cooped Up Kids resource, which are weekly activities that are inspired by birds. The cool thing about the Cooped Up Kids materials is they are topical. They've got teacher lesson plans or adult lesson plans that could be used homeschool or parent or teacher inspired, teacher led. And then the slideshows, which are grade band appropriate, we've got K2, 3, 5, and 6, 8 versions. Encourage kids to go through the slideshows, read content, think critically, play games, do activities, get outside, designed to be pretty independent. So if you're looking for some science ideas, especially if you're remote or blended learning, absolutely check out the Cooped Up Kids resources. And I'll just conclude by encouraging you to go to the Nasco website and search for the materials that we have available there. As I mentioned, there's the full kit, the consumables, we've got just the printed materials. If you're out in the forest collecting pellets on your own, you go for it. And hope that these resources will be really useful to you. I really had so much fun developing and working on this kit with teachers, and I think it's just such an exciting kit because it goes so far beyond just dissecting the owl pellet itself, but going into important content that kids need to use, and also giving them that connection to the birds that actually produce the pellets that live in their neighborhoods in many of their habitats. And encourage you, if you go on our website or take a quick picture of this QR code, we do have some of the bone charts available as a free download so that you can kind of sample what they look like. I hadn't showed it in the PowerPoint yet, but we've got the rodent skeleton diagram that was recommended to us from a teacher who found that the kids didn't understand how the skeleton kind of fit inside the furry animal, and really wanted it to look like an articulated skeleton, that the kids could compare that page where the disarticulated skeleton that maybe they want to glue the bones to how that fits together as an animal stands upright and walks. So again, those 2 pages are available as a free download on the Cornell Lab site. And if you have any questions, I welcome them in that Q&A box that Jordan spoke about earlier. And also, you are more than welcome to reach out to me. Again, my name is Jennifer Fee. I'm the manager of K-12 programs at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. We do have a Twitter account, a Facebook account, and my team's email is k12lab@cornell.edu. And feel free to visit our website and poke around. We've got so many resources that are for K-12 educators. So thank you for your attention tonight. I appreciate being here. And Jordan, have there been any questions that have come in?
As of right now, no. I'm just going to wait I think a couple minutes though, because I know sometimes as we're writing down questions or typing the information in, it might take a little bit. So yeah, on the control panel on the right-hand side, if you have a question, maybe something that you do already for owl pellets that you want to share, or any kind of different activities that are themed around owl pellets, feel free to do so now. I know Jen we're very thankful to have her on here and presenting with us today. She's very knowledgeable. I love the Cornell Lab and everything that they do for K-12 education. It's just wonderful, all the different resources that are available. So hopefully if you haven't seen some of them today, or I haven't heard of some of the ones today, you're able to use them now. Definitely get an opportunity to really get some real world connections. So we'll just wait on a couple more minutes here just to see if there's any other further questions that might pop up. Just real quickly, just kind of saying. And I did want to mention too that I will be adding as well on the handout just now, the actual handout link to all the other different activities. I was actually adding them as we're going, but I always know too that sometimes it's a little bit easier sometimes when you can download and have it all in one file as well. So I just uploaded that in the handout section. Feel free to download that. That will give you the links to everything that was kind of more or less discussed today. Did you have any last remarks then, Jen, on your end?
I don't think so. I appreciate everybody being here today and hope that the resources are useful, and don't hesitate to reach out to me if you should need anything.
All right, great. Well, stay tuned. This is a great partnership we have with Cornell Lab. We might be able to do some future webinars as well. And then make sure to sign up for Nasco's regular emails. We definitely market some of those out. I know Cornell also has some of their own email list too. If you want to sign up for their newsletters for other different resources and things that they have going on, feel free to make sure to do that as well. But yeah, as of right now, I don't see any questions. So I think we're all good. I think everybody was
Well,
just
thank
in awe
you.
of your presentation.
Please. Thanks, Jordan. I really appreciate this collaboration. Appreciate your time tonight so much.
All right.
All
Well, thank
right.
you,
Good night,
everybody.
everybody. Thank you so
Ha-
much for coming.
Have a great Monday, everyone. Take
All
care.
right. Bye-bye.